Hello everyone, welcome to the Create Table Challenge solution. So in this lecture we're just going to go through the solution for creating the table. As a reminder of what the task was from the previous lecture, you had to create a table to organize our potential leads. And we had the following information to organize. We had a customer's first name, their last name, email, some sign-up date, and then the number of minutes they spent on the DVD rental site. And I also mentioned that you should have some sort of additional ID tracker for these customers or potential leads. So let's go ahead and jump to pgadmin and code this out. Now I want to just make a quick point. There's lots of ways and you had a lot of flexibility on how you could actually create this table. So if you didn't choose the same column names or the same constraints as I did, don't worry. As long as you're actually able to create the table in a way that makes sense for solving the problem, then you're totally fine. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump to pgadmin. Okay, so here I am at pgadmin. I already opened up a SQL editor, and I opened it up in the learning database. You can see here I'm on learning, but you can open it up in whatever database you want. You can go ahead and make a new database for the challenges. Doesn't really matter. So first thing you had to do was say create table statement. So hopefully that one was pretty obvious. And then you had to name your table. So we'll choose leads as the name of our table. And then the next step was to create a set of parentheses, brackets, semicolon here. And what's going to go in between all this are the column names, the data type they are, and then the column constraint. So again, we had to have some sort of user ID. That was the very last thing specified, but it should be here the primary key column. It's what it makes the most sense. And given based off the other examples we saw earlier when we were creating tables, it makes sense that your ID column should be a serial data type in order to increment and make sure that we add more IDs as we get more sign-up users. So let's go ahead and specify this to be primary key, comma, and then we're just going to continue this pattern for adding more columns. So the next column, we can go ahead and call it first name. This should probably be a variable character, and it's up to you how long you want to define it. Let's just say 50 as a standard. It really depends on your work environment as to what end values you're going to choose. You can go ahead and check documentation online or talk to your manager as far as what are acceptable and non-acceptable end values there, because there's a lot of flexibility there. So you have first name. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for the last name column of these potential leads. So variable character, let's call it 50n. And again, I'm saying not null because I want to make sure that we still have those values as we go along. And then the next column, we had an email from this potential customer. Let's go ahead and also have that be a variable character. A bit larger, right, because it's an email address, not just the first or last name. And for this, I'm going to make sure that it's unique in addition to being not null. And the reason for that is because I want to make sure we only get one sign up per email address. So I don't want multiple people signing up on the same email address. So you should have at least hopefully realized that it should have probably been unique. If not, it's not a huge deal, but it's good to keep that kind of thing in mind when you're creating these tables for your database. Next up, we wanted to track the minutes that the person was going to be there. So for that, we could have said something like minutes column, just called it a simple integer. You could have also specified as some sort of floating point number. This was up to you. You have a lot of flexibility on this one because it was pretty vague as far as what the actual requirement was for this. So I'm just going to say minutes is an integer, make sure it's not null so we actually keep track of it. And then finally, we have a, let's say, sign up dates. Or let's go ahead and say sign up TS for timestamp. And this should have been some sort of temporal data type timestamp. If you wanted to add a time zone data to it, that's fine too. And let's go ahead and make sure this is not null as well. And that should basically be it. So if we go ahead and run this, make sure it works out. And here, query returns successfully with no result. So that makes sense since we just created a table. So now we have our leads table with these columns with the specified data types and constraints. So that was a simple example of how you could have done it. Again, you had a flexibility, you could have changed the end values for the characters, but hopefully this gave you a general idea of what kind of things you should be accounting for beforehand. So in general, creating these tables and databases, you really want to make sure that a key element of this is that you kind of predict problems that may occur in the future before they actually occur. So you want to predict things like people having the same email address, or people trying to put in the same password, or making sure that you have not nulls in places where you don't want there to be null values, etc. So it takes a lot of patience to kind of develop this attitude of, okay, let me think of all the ways a user can mess up beforehand. But that's kind of a big part of creating these databases and these data systems. So keep that in mind. All right. With that being said, thanks everyone. Hope the challenge was pretty straightforward. If not, you can review the Create Tables lecture for a review. Okay, thanks, and I will see you at the next lecture.